everybody. Welcome back to another TMA class tonight. Proud to have Ben back teaching us the second round of Fusion. This is a beginner's course in Fusion. If you missed last week's, TMA members, head over to the website, look at on the courses tab, and you will find the class from last week so you can catch up. But for now, we're going to get started here in just a few minutes. I want to introduce you. For those who don't know, this is Charlie Kosorik. Charlie will be helping with classes throughout the year from time to time, along with Chris Cute. Like we said before, we're trying to get these classes really consistent, and if one of us isn't available, the other one will be. So Charlie, thank you very much for joining us here on the classes. Really appreciate that. If you guys have any questions, remember throughout, we got the chat section open. Please feel free to use that. Throw up your questions, and we will answer them the best we can. So I guess we should probably turn it over to the Master Fusion guy himself, Ben Brandt. Why don't you take it away for us, brother?
All right. Thanks, Izzy. Evening, everyone. Glad you could jump in and join us here. Like Izzy said, this is our second installment of the Beginning Fusion series here for 2018. For those of you who missed last week, there is a recorded video up on the on Izzy's website for the Toolmasters website, so you can watch that if you need to catch up. And we sort of treat these as sort of 1 hour lessons that you can follow along with if you choose, or you just watch, and try to build a model or two and talk about some of the basic concepts as we go. So last time we made a really simple model of a paper towel holder and talked about some basics of how to create some solid objects and a little bit about sketching and how that stuff works. So tonight we're going to do a basic model of a sort of a desk, a real simple thing, just to teach you some more concepts about components and some more about sketching and a little bit about parameters, and we'll see how much time we've got. Might try to hit another model in the process, but anyway, let's dive into it here. I'm going to share my screen here so folks can see what I'm doing. Here is our class number 2 model for class number 2 this evening. Shut that down. All right, so I've got Fusion up in front of me. Again, if you miss the mouse clicks and keyboard strokes that I'm using, the keyboard buttons and mouse clicks will show up in the bottom right here. So if you remember from last week, we learned a little bit about the data panel here that I can pull out from the left side. And within your projects, you can pick the project that you're working on. I've got one here set up for TMA Class. If I double click that, I've got my models, and we're going to right off the bat click Save, and we're going to call this Cubby Desk. We'll click Save here. So the idea that I'm sort of working off of here is this fictitious, customer of mine has a little cubby in their room, and they want to put a little desk in there to sort of fit that space. So imagine you've got a wall and you've got a little cutout and inset area. They say, oh, I want to build just like a little tabletop in there to sort of fill that space so I can sit down and pay bills or put a phone there or something. And so I want to model, a little desk that's going to fit that space. But to sort of, give the customer a visualization of what this is going to look like, it would probably be helpful if we can draw, say, the wall and the floor as well, so we can sort of place it in that space and size it to fit. So we don't just have a model of a desk floating in the middle of space. We can actually show what it might look like. So to get started here, I've got the top level here. It says Cubby Desk in my browser up here. I'm going to right click on this top level component and say New Component. So now I've got this one here titled Component 1, and I'm going to call this wall and floor. This is just here for visual reasons. I'm going to put the wall and the floor together into one piece, basically. So I'll hit enter. And you can see it's already activated because this little round radio button is selected. It's got the dot in the middle. So we'll start off by just creating a sketch of what this wall looks like. So go up to my toolbar and say create sketch. And I'm going to pick the top plane here. So now I've got a top view, and I'm going to zoom way out here, and we'll just do a little bit of sketching here. Let's keep this real simple. I'm going to make a rectangle. Hit escape to get out of the rectangle tool. Do a sketch dimension. I've got it up in my toolbar here, so I'll hit dimension. And let's make this overall fake wall, say 72 inches or 6 feet. Got to zoom out here so it all fits. We'll make this, I don't know, 3 feet, 3 FT. And it's still kind of floating out in space here. So I'm going to add a little bit of a constraint just to place it where I want it. So over in my sketch palette, I'm going to pick midpoint constraint. Click that. Now you can see the little triangle next to my arrow. Oh. Let me hit escape there. Midpoint. There we go. And I'll click the bottom edge of the rectangle, and then I'll click the origin point. And now it's centered that line on the origin. And now I can't move this around anymore. I'm going to do one more rectangle. So imagine this is like the top view of a wall or a section of wall. This will make more sense in a minute. I'm going to do kind of the same thing here. This is our little inset area of this wall. I'm going to do a dimension, make that, let's say, I don't know, 20 inches deep and 36 inches wide. I'm going to center this one also. So I'll say midpoint. I'll click the bottom edge of this rectangle and that origin again. So now I've got a rectangle within a rectangle. I'm going to stop the sketch. I got to zoom out again because this is kind of big. And now we'll do an extrusion. So we go under Create, Extrude. I'm just going to extrude this sort of C shape here. Bring it up, and let's make it 8 feet tall. And just to give us a little sense of where the floor is here, I'm going to go into my wall and floor component here and expand it out. And expand out the sketches section. Here we go. And you see here, sketch 1 is the sketch we just made, but it's hidden. That little light bulb is turned off because once I extruded it, it automatically hid it for me because it assumed I was done with it. But you can use a sketch more than once if you like. So I can turn this sketch back on with the light bulb. And now it kind of shows up here in my model. And I'm going to go back to the extrude tool. And I'm going to pick that C shape again, but I'm also going to pick the inside portion. And I'm just going to drag it down this way. We'll say -6 inches, because negative just happens to be this direction. -6. Enter. Now my sketch, you can still see that sketch sort of floating in the middle there. Let's turn that off by clicking the light bulb. And that'll be good enough for now. I'm going to save this. It's a good habit to get into. then we can start building something within here. I'm going to get a quick drink of water here. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, well, I don't see any questions necessarily, but I see folks are talking to each other in the chat, so that's good. Charlie and Izzy are keeping an eye on things. Let's see. Gary says he thought he heard about they might be taking away the free platform or changing it significantly. Gary, I have not heard that. I guess it's possible, but I can't really comment because I don't know.
They are not taking away the free platform, but they're no longer updating it. So SketchUp Maker, I guess, the rumor is this as far as they're going to go. So the only way to get the improvements is if you're buying SketchUp Pro.
Oh, we're talking SketchUp. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
I read that out of context.
Gary was saying because of SketchUp changing their platform, that more people are moving to Fusion.
Got it.
Some rumors that have been floating around.
Okay.
And what I've heard is just a rumor as well. I don't know. I don't know specifics. I haven't seen any documentation on it.
Got it. Okay. All right. You know what? This is bugging me just a little bit. I'm going to add to this wall and floor here and give us a little bit more floor. So I'm going to create
Ben,
AC
sorry. Nailed it. Had a question about how you centered the sketch out on constraints. So if we can review that real quick before we move on.
No problem. So I'll go back to my sketch here. So I'll just draw another rectangle here, kind of out in space. So if I want this, now I got to hit escape because I'm still in the rectangle tool. There we go. If I want this rectangle, like one of these lines to be centered on this point, over in the sketch palette here, under constraints, there's one here called midpoint. It's the triangle. And I click on that, and then my mouse pointer, you can see there's a little red triangle next to my mouse pointer that tells me I'm on the midpoint tool. And so now I have to select two different objects that I want to sort of snap together on midpoints. So the first thing I do is click one of the lines of my rectangle. So I'll grab this bottom line here. And then I have to click something else for it to snap to. And I'm just going to click the origin point right here. And there it just snapped the bottom of, now I hit escape, and I can grab one of the points of this rectangle and try to move it around, and it's staying centered on that point. Now I haven't given this a height dimension or anything yet, so I can still move that around, but that's how the snapping works, or at least snapping to center. I'll get rid of that. All right. Yep, no problem, AC. AC says, thanks for going back over that. So like I said last week, that's the advantage of being in on the live class, is that if you have questions, you can get them answered. So you can't always get that with a pre-recorded video. So feel free to speak up if you need anything. Okay. So to get to the desk that we're going to model in here, I'm going to go back up to this sort of top level here, cubby desk component. I'm going to click the little radio button next to it to activate it, or I can right click and say activate. So now I'm working at the top sort of assembly level. This is like an assembly of parts, sort of. And I right click on that and say new component. And I'm going to double click on this and give it a new name. We'll just call this desk and hit enter. And now desk, because I just created it, it automatically got activated. The the button is checked here. You can see the wall, kind of that we model here is there, but it's sort of transparent, so I can still see it and work with it. But because it's not activated, it is kind of see-through. But I can use this, so even though I'm making a sort of what's a separate component from the wall, I can reference it, I can use it to sort of create my model. So just about everything we do starts with a sketch. Previously, you may have seen, we draw one sketch to extrude one shape. We're going to do a little bit of a layout sketch that we'll use multiple times here. So first things first, I'm going to say create sketch. And now it's asking me, where do I want to sketch on? Where do I want to draw this next picture? And I want to draw it on the back surface of our cubby here. So I'm just going to click on there. And now my sketch is on the back of that wall. And I actually find it helpful sometimes to rotate the view around so I get a better idea of where this is in 3D space. But I'm going to jump back to the front view here. So I'll go up to my view cube and click on front, or I can go in the sketch palette and click on this button that says look at. It'll bring me back to a sort of straight on front view. So first I'm going to draw a rectangle. So I'll go to sketch, and I've got the rectangle button in my toolbar. And I'm just going to kind of hover over this edge here, and the little blue X shows up to tell me I'm going to snap to that edge. I'll click there and move my mouse over and snap to the other edge. There we go. We'll zoom in a bit so we can see that better. And we'll hit escape because I'm done with the rectangle tool for now. So if we're looking at this desk sort of front on, I'm going to have a top piece across the top, a bottom piece, and two side pieces. Actually, it might be easier if I just draw all four of them. I'm going to drag this up and make it a little thinner. And we'll draw some more rectangles. So I'll click on the rectangle tool, grab that left edge, and then snap over to the right edge. And now I'll draw my sides. I'll snap to this corner here between the wall and the top piece. And then snap down to the bottom piece. And do the same thing on the other side. Start in the one corner and then snap down to the other piece. Hit escape. And let's put some dimensions on here. So we'll go to sketch dimension. And I want to set the thickness of these boards. So I'm going to go click on the bottom line here and the top line here. Let's make that 0.75, 3/4 of an inch. And I could put dimensions on all the rest of these, but I sort of like working with constraints because then I don't have to enter or update lots of different dimensions. So if I use the if I use the equal constraint here down towards the bottom, click on that equal tool. I have to zoom in a little bit. I'll click on the one line here that's the thickness of my top piece. And then I click on, let's see. I'm trying to click on the top edge of this side piece, but it's not letting me. It's trying to highlight that whole line. But if I click and hold my mouse button, I get this little pop-up here that lets me see everything that was under my mouse pointer there. So there's, as I hover over these, the top one is the long line, the bottom one is the short line. So that they're kind of sitting on top of each other, but I want to pick the short line. So I'll pick this bottom one and click it here where it says sketch curve. And now I've effectively made the thickness of this rectangle match the thickness of this rectangle, and I didn't have to put a dimension on it. I'm going to try to do the same thing over here. I'm still on the equal tool because the little equal sign is there next to my pointer. So I'll grab the left edge of this one, and I got the same situation here. I can't grab the top edge of this one, so I click and hold. Oop. Click and hold, and then find the one that I want. It happens to be the bottom one. There, now that's 3/4 of an inch. Now we'll do the same thing down here one more time. Grab the left edge of this one and the bottom edge of this one. I gotta click and hold. There's the one that I want, sketch curve. I hit escape now because I'm done with the equals tool. Now I've got a thickness here. If I change this to 1 inch, they all change, which is handy. We'll put that back to 0.75. And let's give another dimension here, a sketch dimension tool. Give this thing a inside height, let's say 5 inches. Hit escape, and now I can still move this up and down. Like, it's constrained enough that it knows, how big everything is. But let's give it a height from the floor. So I'll go up here to sketch dimension again. And I'll start my dimension by clicking on the line that represents the floor. Oh, it still had my bottom line selected. I don't want that. I'm going to hit escape. Sketch dimension again. Start at the floor. And now I'll click again on the very top of the desk. And not even sure how tall my own desk is, but we'll just guess at like 30 inches. So that's floor to desktop. Stop sketch. Now we put a fair amount of work into that sketch to draw 4 different shapes and give it a proper distance up from the floor. But now we can use that sketch to produce just about all the parts we might want here. So now we can go to create, use our extrude tool that we're so familiar with by now. Click on extrude, and let's start with the bottom piece. So I clicked on that bottom rectangle, and I could extrude it out to like the outside edge, but I'm going to give this thing a specific depth here. Let's say 18 inches. Oh, now our sketch disappeared because it, again, thought that I was done with it. So I got to expand out my desk and expand out sketches. There we go. And turn on that sketch. Oh, and I forgot to do something here. All right, so down in the timeline on the bottom here, you can see this last item in the list here is the extrude we just did. I'm going to double click that. There we go. So when I was extruding, I set the 18-inch extrusion, but I wanted to make this into a new component. Generally, when you're making models of things that contain multiple pieces, you want to treat each piece as a component within Fusion. Because once you have it sort of self-contained in a component, it's easier to work with. You can, make drawings from it easier. So if it's conceptually its own part, it's good to make it its own component. So in this extrusion feature window, under operation, I'm going to come down. Let's see. Oh. Should say new component, but I may be missing something. Let's cancel that. Apologize for that, folks. You know what? I'm going to go back to this extrusion here in my timeline, right click and delete it. Usually when I extrude, it says it gives me the option to make a new component. I'm not sure why it didn't, but we'll tackle this a different way. I'm on my desk component here. We've got our sketch here, so that's good. We still want that. I'm going to right click and make a new component. And we'll call this bottom. And now bottom is activated. I'm going to create our extrusion again. And that sketch is here. It's still kind of see-through because it's not activated, but I can use it. We'll make that 18 inches and click OK. So now we'll kind of go through that same process here. We'll go up to desk, right click on desk, make a new component, give it a name here, left for the left side. Now left is activated, so I'm going to extrude this left side piece, let's say 18 inches. Go back to desk, right click, new component. We'll double click that, give it a name, right. Go to extrude. And I'm gonna sort of, from the view here, I can't actually click on this because it's gonna pick the front face of our wall here. So I'm gonna turn the view. I can either turn the view so I can see that part of our sketch, or kind of like we did before, if I can't click on it directly, if I click and hold, I get everything that's under my mouse pointer. So it's not this front face. There we go. Profile. A profile is like a shape on a sketch. You can see that it's just barely lit up in a light blue color. There we go. Make that 18 inches. Enter. And one more here. We'll go back to our desk, right click and say new component. Double click it. And we'll call that top. I realize we're getting a little repetitious here, but bear with me. Click on the shape of our top, drag it out, type in 18 inches, enter. And now, go way up to the top here in my model browser and reactivate Cubby Desk. Oh, and I've still got that sketch on desk lit up, so I'm going to click the light bulb and turn that off because I don't need to see it anymore. So now we've got a little desk that you could fit a chair underneath, throw some stuff in the compartment, do some work up here. I'm going to click save. Now, say this is just a general visual that I want to give to the customer and say, here's what it might look like. And maybe once you get out there and get some actual dimensions, you figure out, oh, it's a little bit bigger or a little bit deeper, or we need to adjust this or that. Now, this is a fairly simple model. It's not too difficult. I can go, if I need to make changes, for instance, I can go into my wall and floor component, activate that, and I go down to my timeline here, and here's my first sketch. Double click that, zoom out so I can see it all. We find out, oh, it's not 36 inches, it's 37. And well, maybe it's not 20 inches deep, maybe it's 17. Now you figure out, oh, okay, they give me rough dimensions. Now I know what they actually are. Stop the sketch. Go back and activate the top level here. And our sketch of the overall shape, adjusted to fit. So now it's the proper width across. But I also told it to come out 18 inches, which it's still doing, but now it's sticking out from the wall. We don't necessarily want that. So that's another set of features we'd have to go in and tweak. So this is where parameters come in. And once you kind of get a feel for what parameters can do, you can work them into your model as you go along if you think there's stuff that you want to tweak or adjust. But basically, it lets you set variables that makes it easy to change stuff in your model. So take, for example, the size of that cubby that we just had to adjust by working on our sketch. Up in the toolbar here in the modify section, all the way down here, it says change parameters. I happen to have put it up in my toolbar. I think it's there by default. I don't remember, but it's this little, I think it's an epsilon character, Greek character. But if I click on change parameters, this little window comes up. And I'm going to collapse this. What I want here is user parameters. This is parameters that I want to put into my model. So I'll click the little plus button here to make a new one. And we're going to start basically giving different dimensions names in our model that we can use over and over again. So we'll call the first one here cubby width. And default unit here is inches. And let's make that, what did I say it was, 37? Make it 37. And if I click OK, now nothing's happening to our model yet because we're not using them, but we'll put one more in here with the plus button. And we'll call this one cubby depth. And let's make that, I think it was 17. Click OK. So now I've got something called cubby width and something called cubby depth that happen to be these two lengths. Click OK to close this window. Now let's go back into our sketch. Now, right now the whole assembly here is activated here at the top level. I can sort of mouse over the stuff in my timeline and go back to this sketch towards the beginning, and our sketch at the bottom of our floor sort of lights up so you can see it. So I'm going to double click, zoom out so I can fit it in here. There we go. So now these are still 37 and 17. I'm going to edit these dimensions. So if I double click this dimension, instead of 37, I type in CUBB, and it's already started to complete what I'm typing here by giving me a little menu. It says, do you want cubby depth or cubby width? So I'm going to pick cubby width, and then I have to hit enter for that to take. And now here it still says 37, but it's got a little FX in front of it. I think that's short for function. That just means that it's using a parameter or something to calculate out that value of 37. And now I'll double click the 17-inch dimension. And instead of 17, we'll start typing in CUBBY. I can type the start of it, or I can delete here and start typing depth, DEPTH. And it'll figure out that I want cubby depth. So I can either click that or press enter, and then enter again to make it stick. And now I've got this fx here on both dimensions. Let's stop the sketch. So there, now that sketch actually has some parameters inside of it that are driving it. So if I go up to my parameters window again, and I figure out, oh, that's not actually 37, it's more like 37.25. I can type in 37.25 and I hit enter. And our model just adjusted a little bit. So that was pretty small in case you missed it. Well, let's bump that up to 48 inches. Now everything just updated from that one number. Same thing here. If I want, maybe it's not 17, maybe it's 16, 15. So now that depth just changed. So you can use these parameters in just about anywhere that you can enter a dimension or a number. So let's add another one here for shelf depth. And let's make that, let's say 15. Okay. Okay. And now, if I kind of hover my mouse over the timeline down at the bottom here, the various pieces of our desk will light up when we hover over these little extrude icons. This is sort of a little blue square extruded up, that little icon. So let's go through and tweak these. This is pretty easy to update. I'll double click on one of these extrusion operations here. And now I've immediately got the extrude dialog up here. So up here in the dialog box, I'm not in a sketch or anything. I'm just here in the little distance box. Instead of 18 inches, I can just start typing in HEL, and it'll give me shelf depth. So I pick that and then press enter for it to stick. There we go. So now that top piece is the proper depth. So let's do a little editing here. Let's jump back to the next extrusion. Change that 18 inches back to shelf depth. Enter. And sure, it's a little tedious to have to type this in 4 times. You know, maybe if I'd had a little foresight, I could have put it in correctly the first time. But the extra work now pays off if you know that this design might have to get tweaked or adjusted. So I set all of these to the proper shelf depth. And so now, if I want to see some sort of variation of this design, I can open up my parameters window again. And let's say shelf depth is now 14 inches. Now it's all updated here, so our shelf is a little bit inset from the wall. Now this, you can do more than just straight numbers here. You can actually do some pretty interesting stuff with math. There's a lot of math functions that you can do in here. You can get pretty complex, but just to sort of demonstrate what you can do. Let's say, all right, my shelf depth happens to be 14 inches right now. You know, what if our cubby is only 13 inches deep? Now our shelf is sticking out again, and maybe I don't want it to. Maybe I just want to say, as a rule, I want the desk to be maybe an inch inset from the front of the wall. So so I go to my shelf depth here, and instead of 14 inches, I'm going to delete that. And we can use other parameters to do some math. So if I want the depth of my shelf to be an inch less than the depth of the cubby, I can just start typing that out as a subtraction problem. So if I start typing out CUBBY, get cubby depth, and then minus, say 1 inch, hit enter. Now it's what's called an expression here. It just says, oh, my shelf depth is cubby depth minus 1 inch. and the value over here actually ends up being 12 inches. So now all I have to do is, I've set up some rules. I want my cubby to be 1 inch inset from the wall, or my desk to be 1 inch in from the wall. So if my depth of the cubby here is 16, the depth moved back, but now the desk is 15 inches deep. So I can adjust all this stuff here, the width, depth. I can make that 18 inches. Oh, something's funny. What happened there? Investigate. So something happened here. My side piece is not where it should be. Double click here. Let's look at my sketch. So when I tweaked the width here, Fusion tried to interpret my constraints, and it got something wrong. Let's see here. Now this is a little bit hard to undo. Let's see, those are equal. So my instinct here is I want to try and try to figure out whatever constraint is incorrect here. So it's snapping these corners of these rectangles together, but somehow it's thinking that this one rectangle should be off to the left, but that's wrong. Now, when you've snapped everything together, some of these constraints are really hard to undo. So what I'm actually just going to do is get rid of the rectangle altogether, and that'll it'll cause a couple problems here, but I can show you how to fix that. This is a good skill to be aware of. I'm going to delete that rectangle. And there we go. And that other one. And just redraw them. But I'm going to purposely draw it out in the middle of space here. Hit escape. And we'll try to make these constraints a little bit smarter, because sometimes when you just automatically snap to stuff, you can see it doesn't always get your intent quite right. So first thing I'm going to do is use the equals tool to make that the same thickness here, 3/4 of an inch it happens to be. And now we'll do collinear. That's where two lines basically run on top of each other. So I'm going to pick the collinear constraint, pick the top edge of this and the bottom edge of the top piece, and then do the same thing here at the bottom edge to this edge. And then the left edge to the left edge of the top piece. And now I've told it, matching up on these edges, it should be able to resize my sketch properly. I got to go over to the right side here and essentially do the same thing. So we'll go up to the rectangle tool, draw that out. And then I like to use my constraints to force it into place where I want it to go. I'm going to hit escape out of the rectangle tool and do equals first to get our thickness the same. And then again, use collinear to place these lines on top of each other. And then make the right sides flush. So I'll click this line and this line. And I've got a feature turned on here in Fusion. You guys can see the bottom rectangle here is blue. And the reason it's blue, hit escape here, is because it's not fully constrained. It's that blue is trying to tell me that something's wrong. When I deleted one of my side rectangles, it lost that equals constraint. So it doesn't know that it's supposed to be the same thickness. So let's fix that. I'll click equals, click on the left edge. Oop, what happened there? Control Z to undo. I think I had something else already selected, so that's why I like to hit escape a lot to make sure everything's deselected. Equal left edge of that and bottom edge of that. Okay, and that's still moving around. Oop. Give that a height again, 5 inches. All right, stop our sketch. So obviously something's a little off here because that shouldn't be solid. Because I deleted those side rectangles and redrew them, Fusion is, sometimes it doesn't know how to resolve that, but apparently here it's taken its best guess and it thinks I wanted to extrude this somewhere. So let's go into our desk component here, expand that out. And first let's go to the left side piece. So let's see here, top. So as I mouse over and select these, top, right, left, that one looks good. Top is lit up, that's the left, or that's the top piece. Bottom looks good. Left is not so good. It's showing it's looking like the top piece again. So I'm going to pick left and activate it with the round button here. And now down in the timeline, I can see just one little extrusion operation to make that left piece because that's the only thing we did in here. Double click that. Now I can see it's still extruding to the depth that we set up, but it has the wrong profile because I messed with the original sketch. So in this edit feature window here, under profile, it says one selected. Remember that profile is the shape on the sketch that we extruded out. If I click the X, that's going to deselect it. And here that still says select. So now I'm going to pick my left edge again. Say I want this piece. Everything else stays the same. Shelf depth is there. Click OK. So that's looking good. And I'm going to go to the right side piece and activate that. Yeah, I see guys in the chat basically talking about this is where you get frustrated. And, admittedly, I did not model this beforehand. I'm doing this off the cuff here. So it's almost better this way sometimes because then I run into goofy stuff like this and have to solve it.
I was just thinking the same thing, Ben. I'm actually enjoying this class probably as much as I've enjoyed any of your classes because we're getting to watch you problem solve throughout this. So this is really cool.
Excellent. All right, so now I've activated the right side because we got to fix that. And I'll double click that extrude operation. Now, sometimes usually what happens, what I expected would happen is that extrude would just fail and it would light up with a yellow color here to tell you Fusion didn't know what to do with this extrude because we lost whatever piece of the sketch you wanted. But here it's, oh, this is goofy. It thinks we're extruding 3 shapes here. So again, we'll go into that extrusion operation here, exit out, and then click the piece that I want again. So that looks better. I'll go back up to the top level, activate. And that looks better. And just because it's bugging me, I'm going to go into the wall and floor component here, activate it, and give this thing a more believable floor. So I'm going to create a sketch on this big U-shaped front face. And draw a rectangle here, snap it to the bottom corner. And I'll snap it to the right edge. And it looks like it's letting me snap it up here too. There we go. Now, except I've got a blue line, which means that could have any height. So I'm going to say, that line is selected, so I'm going to hit collinear. So it already knows about that first line, and then click the little line here that represents our floor. There we go. Stop the sketch. And extrude this out, say 2 feet. And as long as I've got wall and floor activated, I'm going to roll back to our very first sketch. Oop, zoom out. Let's make that, I don't know, 12 feet, 12 FT. There we go. Now that looks a little better. So from all of this, you could go in and, again, tweak your parameters, size your model to fit the space. Let's say it's 39.5. And maybe, 19.25. Everything's adjusting to fit. Everything's sizing like it should. It's coming out to 1 inch short of the wall like I wanted it to, because I told it to in this parameter here, -1 inch. So you could take measurements off of this model. Handy little tool up here in the toolbar under Inspect is Measure. It's the little ruler icon. I can click on any line, and there at that top edge of my desk, it's showing me, oh, that's 39.5 inches. Well, I knew that one, but if you need to measure other things, you can say Inspect and measure from one surface to another surface. So you could take dimensions off of your model like this, or you could also, from these components, generate actual paper drawings. So if you need to print out drawings and dimension some drawings, to come up with some sort of cut list, you can take each of these components and make a drawing of the top and a drawing of the bottom and a drawing of the side. These all happen to be, left and right are identical to each other, but you can do that because these are separate components. So that just shows some of the power you get with components and more so parameters. And covered a few troubleshooting techniques here. Hope that was useful to everyone. And we're coming up on the end of our time here. And I see AC Nailed It has a quick question here. Can you extrude and snap to a nearby body like in SketchUp? You can. I'm going to show. So for example, if I just click on the top piece here, down in my timeline, you can see these 3 little diagonal lines here have appeared over this extrude. So it's giving me a hint that, oh, the thing I just clicked on was created back on this extrude operation. So this is the extrusion we did for the top piece. Let's say I don't want that to go to my shelf depth. Maybe I want that to go out to the front wall. So instead of extruding to a set distance, this is in the extrude window here, I say extent is going to be up to an object. So to object. And now it says object, select. I have to pick what I want it to extrude out to. Let's see if it'll let me pick the front of the wall here. And it doesn't like, it seems to have trouble extruding out to surfaces sometimes because it's not actually meeting the surface because there's nothing like physically there to stop it. So usually the way I get around that is since I can't extrude to that surface, I'm gonna exit out and I'm gonna extrude out to a point. So if I go down here to this little intersection point where the front wall meets the floor, you see that little point lights up. Then it can reason out, okay, that's how far you want to extrude. So if I click OK on that, now that extrusion knows it should always go out to this point. So if I change my depth again to say 25 inches, the bottom three pieces all follow the rule of coming out an inch short, and now our top piece is following the rule of extruding out to that point. So it's still coming out flush with the wall because I told it to stop at that point.
And Jim Bashirs is asking, what's the significance of the different colored lines over the top of your timeline?
Oh, good question. We created a lot of different components here. So, for example, if you look up in the browser here for wall and floor, just left of the light bulb, that one has like a sort of a red, maybe salmon color next to it. And then if you look down in the timeline, there's that same color. And those are all the features for that component. And since I've got the whole thing activated here, all these colors are just showing you different components that these operations belong to. So that's it's sort of a visual thing to help you match up. Like if I extend out desk here, bottom left, right, and top all have different colors as well. Let's see. Tom says, could you have copied the first side to the right instead of redrawing it? Yes. In this case, I thought it was simpler to draw the sketch and do all that. But, I could take the right piece and delete it if I wanted to. So now that's gone. Typically with this type of operation, I would mirror it. And I'll do this kind of quickly just to demonstrate, but I can put in construction geometry, sort of like a construction line in a sketch. It's just geometry that's there to for your reference or to help you with something. I like to create a midplane. I'll pick two surfaces. I'll pick my left side and my right side. Now I've got this orange plane in the middle. So it's not so much a copy paste. It's like a copy paste with an intent, and my intent is to make a mirror image of this side. So I'll say create mirror, and the mirror box pops up here. I want to mirror a whole component. So I'll say mirror a component. What's the object I want to mirror? I'll pick my left side piece over here in the browser. And then the mirror plane is that mid plane I just created. Click OK. So there I only created the left side piece, and then the right side is now just a mirror image of that. So any changes I make to the left will show up on the right. And let's turn off that.
Can you turn that off, Ben? Where it automatically makes changes to the copy, to the mirror?
Yes. Well, let's see. Hold on. Mirror plane. Actually, well, with mirroring, I don't think you can. Usually what I'll do in that case, if I want to make a copy of something but I don't want them to be always the same,
Mhm.
is I'll take a component, right click and say copy, and then I'll go into the wherever I want it, component I want to paste it into, and paste makes it so they're linked. So one is always going to be same as the other. Paste new will drop in sort of its own independent copy of it. So then I could go back and change the copy without affecting the original.
Okay.
So like the default here, paste is to have them be the same, always match up with each other. Paste new gives you sort of like a fresh independent copy of it.
Got it. Thanks.
Jim says, how did you generate that reference plane again? Under the construct section here, you get all your construction geometry. I picked a midplane. And then you have to pick two flat surfaces. So if I'll pick the top of the wall here and the floor. And click OK. Oh, and it's not hidden because I turned off this construction folder. There we go. So it just created this midplane because I told it to create something in the middle of this surface and this surface. There's some other useful stuff in here, but yep, that's how I did the midplane.
Okay.
All right.
Good
Very
questions,
cool.
everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, once again, thank you so much for walking us through that. And I actually really enjoyed this one, getting to see you kind of troubleshoot along the way there. That's, for some reason, I think I learn better that way than I do, just do this, because then you actually see it happening and it sticks with you. So
No problem.
Cool class.
Thank you.
Charlie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate that.
Glad to be here.
I'm sorry?
So glad to be here.
Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I'm still suffering from the flu, and it's affecting everything, including my hearing. So I apologize. Anyway, guys, listen up. This class will be available to watch on the TMA webpage within 48 hours. So if you want to come back and reference this while you're walking through your introduction to Fusion, it's available for you. And of course, Ben has been pretty generous about his time. If you have a question for him, please just throw it up on Facebook and tag him in it. He's one of those guys that's really good about getting to questions. So we'll be back next Wednesday, 8 o'clock, with our third installment of Beginning Fusion with the master Ben Brandt. So, and we look forward to seeing you guys then. Don't forget, next Wednesday, 8 o'clock, and we'll put some reminders up in the Facebook group for those of you who are interested in following along as well. So, good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.